Everyone, welcome to Optimized for Humans. My name is Usha. I'm an executive coach and consultant, and on this podcast, I speak with leaders who are out in the field leading AI transformation, thinking about AI transformation, and learning our way through AI transformation and AI adoption and how to make it optimized for humans. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Armando Viteri. I'm very excited to speak with you. I'd love to start by just asking you to share a little bit about yourself and your experience and what excites you about this topic.
Sure. Okay. So, by many years ago, academic background, I was computer science, electrical engineering from MIT. And back then, I actually did a little bit of studying AI, the AI kind of sort of first generation AI. So, in one way or another, I've been involved in AI since the days when I used to have hair. So I've been around it for a very long time and certainly have seen the peaks and valleys over decades about AI technology. And certainly, in fact, one of the things that people find confusing is that they'll say, geez, this AI stuff's been around for a really long time. How come there's so much hype about it right now without really understanding that AI is more of a collection of tools that it's a basket of tools, right? And this basket is called AI, but the components, the tools that are actually in that basket kind of range pretty broadly in the types of technical approaches, the kind of solutions, etc. Today, I'm involved in an investment group that does invest, that has in the portfolio both services companies that serve various needs, but also product companies that serve various markets. The only thing that glues together these various product companies, they all use AI at the core. Now, on the service end, lastly, and on the services side, we do an awful lot of strategic consulting and implementation work for AI companies. So that's kind of the most relevant part of what I'm doing now is this kind of strategic consulting and implementation work that the company does.
Yeah, so you're really, from our conversations earlier, what I got is you're really sort of in the thick of it. You and your company are actually really involved in the technological implementation and transformation around this. And you're working with sort of mid-market all the way through to enterprise clients. And I'd love for you to share, what are some 2 to 3 things that are going really well in terms of how, your clients are implementing AI.
Well, despite that often quoted MIT study that's talking about the 95% failure rate, the technology itself works. The issue is not the technology. So I don't think the industry has really settled into how best to use the tools quite yet. I think there was an over fixation on foundation models as being the path to AGI, and therefore it was not just the consumer kind of application, Chat GPT and all the rest, but also ultimately it was going to be the solution for the enterprise. I think as AI is maturing more, we're seeing more realistic uses of the technology in appropriate use cases using the appropriate kinds of approaches. So I think that's just been a matter of maturation. Let's face it, will cause at least the generative AI wave. There've been a number of AI waves. The generative AI wave has only been around for 3 years in a little bit, right? So it's certainly very early on in trying to figure out all this stuff.
Can you share an example of a client who's been able to really change their business or transform things using one of the tools?
Well, there are some low-hanging fruit applications, right? Especially in areas like, well, for generative AI, there's some obvious low-hanging fruit kind of implementations that oftentimes have to do with sales, customer service, marketing, etc. And then for the more traditional forms of AI, there's any number of good use cases that have to do with optimization, logistics, etc. Um, so for a case study, I'll give you one within our own portfolio. There was a time that we had for this one particular company, we had 60 sales guys that were pounding away on the phones, on emails, etc. And by implementing a generative AI interface, the primary touch point to the customer is through natural language processing kind of approaches. And today, we're able to do substantially more revenue volume at a substantially higher closure rate, but there's only 7 guys that are overseeing what AI, the interactions that the AI is doing. So you're talking about roughly an order of magnitude drop in the human resource that's needed to do that kind of the mundane part of the sales process. Obviously, that's very different from the relationship building, account management, etc. But the mundane part of sales is, at least in that particular use case, it was a really good fit.
Yeah, I mean, all of the examples that you mentioned, like around sales, marketing, et cetera, customer service, you're really highlighting some of those use cases where those mundane, repetitive tasks can actually be outsourced to these tools that actually have better results and have the humans kind of overseeing those and step into different roles where there is more of that relationship building required. And I'd love to know as well, on the flip side of that, where are you seeing clients struggling around implementation?
Well, it's two areas. One I alluded to already. Um, I think once again, there's this rush to think that foundation models, large language models, were the solution. And I think part of that was driven by really poor advice on the part of the large management consulting firms. I'll call them out. The BCG, the Bains, the McKinseys did a terrible job. Ours continued a terrible job because fundamentally they don't understand the technology. And oftentimes they have relationships with the foundation model providers. So by default, they are sold, given that they're technically unsophisticated, they get sold into the idea that geez, foundation models are the solution. But I think that the market is maturing quickly. I think it's evolving toward this concept that you have reasoning frameworks, and these reasoning frameworks wind up um, coordinating the activity of many small language models that are highly specialized, and those taken as an aggregate wind up providing a much more a better solution for the mid-market to enterprise kind of customer, that is substantially lower cost because they chew up a whole lot less, fewer tokens, right? And tokens directly applies to cost, right? Does it in a more information or IP secure way, etc. So it has all kinds of these different architectural approaches have all kinds of benefits that a foundation model just simply can't provide. And I think the light bulb is starting to just go off about these kind of problems. Because once again, you have these massive marketing hype engines saying, geez, we've spent uh, a bazillion billion dollars developing this thing that, geez, we could almost declare it to be AGI. Clearly, that's going to be the solution for your organization. And it's like, yeah, maybe not. So
Yeah,
that's one problem, is that there's the problem of the one size fits all, right? So if you think of AI
yeah.
as a collection of tools, that collection of tools can solve a broad class of problems. But if you fixate on one particular kind of tool, the large language model, the hammer, right? You're not going to solve every potential issue. You're not going to achieve the productivity gains, etc. So that's one class of struggles.
I just want to comment on that real quick because I think you're bringing up a really astute point there of like a shift that I think we need, which is thinking about it as a tool solution of like, here's the hammer, figure out here's all the ways you can use the hammer to actually creating the conditions where you're empowering your people to figure out and use the entire suite of tools to solve problems faster in the organization. So there's a fundamental like difference in approach of actually let's use this as a way to drive growth and innovation in the company by unleashing people and empowering people to use the full suite of tools to solve the problems and start with the problems they actually have versus here's a hammer and so you just you throw every problem becomes a nail, right? Like it's a great saying for a reason.
Well, it's a classic example is optimization, complex optimizations,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah.
Generative AI, deep learning methods are what you use for those kind of problems, not
Mhm.
generative AI methods. So it's just a question of taking. That's not to say that you don't use a generative AI model to provide the user interface, the language, the multimedia interaction, but at the end you have an optimization engine that's not a generative AI approach. So again, it's a question of it's a grab bag of tools that you use as appropriate, and that I'm seeing more and more kind of articles, a lot more stuff around this concept. Uh, and my fear is that as we've overhyped the foundation model as the panacea, the universal tool, as we've
Can I
hyped.
pause you for a second? When you say foundation model, for those of us who might not know what that term is, can you just explain that for a second?
It's the largest of the large language models, right? So there
Okay.
are there are language models is something that uses its implementation of AI that uses a transformer architecture. And depending on how much you train it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's a large language model. And some of them get big enough that they get declared to be foundation models. And you could probably describe half a dozen foundation models exist in the world.
Sure.
Everything
Sure.
from GPT through
Right.
Claude through et cetera.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I see, I see.
So there's
Yeah, yeah.
about half a dozen of those things that are
Hmm.
out there, right?
Hmm.
That once again get hyped up as being the universal solution, which they are
Gotcha,
not.
gotcha. Right, 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 right. And this is where the nuance is required, is what I'm hearing around what is the problem we're trying to solve for, and let's look at the full suite of tools around what is useful rather than defaulting to
Yeah.
the hammer each time.
And my
Um,
fear is that if you wind up using the hammer for every single problem, you're going to wind up with a lot of failed use cases and then a disillusion. And so the concern about the AI
yeah.
bubble will be self-inflicted because you will
Mhm.
have the largest of the AI companies pushing solutions that are just plain wrong, right? So they will cause the problem that winds up affecting the rest of the industry.
Right.
So that's one problem. You asked me
Mhm.
for problems, plural.
Yeah.
Second
Right.
problem, in a much deeper problem, is that for whatever set of reasons, because of intellectual laziness, how's that for an aggressive way to describe this? What happened in the AI world from the very start of this whole generative AI thing, the simplest way to describe why you would invest in this technology as an enterprise company would be to immediately go to, well, you could reduce staff. So the
Mm.
entire sales pitch became, you got 1,000 sales reps? Now you only need 100, right? So the whole message wound up centering around human resource reduction, right?
Cost
So you got to,
efficiencies.
which is it's the simplest thing to do, right? Because I could go to a
Yeah.
CFO and say, all right, you got 1,000 sales guys, we get rid of 900 of them. Man, you're spending $10 million a year doing generative AI implementations. Man, that is a bargain if you can get rid of 900 people, right?
Yeah.
It's intellectual laziness.
Mhm.
Instead of coming back to an organization saying, hey, here is how AI could be transformative to the organization. There will be some displacement, human resource displacement within your organization that'll happen as a result of it. You need to be prepared, because the bigger problem is not whether or not the technology works or whether or not it can give you any real benefit. The real problems is, how do you, in a rational, humane way, transform your company to being AI at the core? And fundamentally, that's not a technological question, it's a human resource question. Because I will guarantee you something, well, certainly something that we see all the time, is that the C-suite decides we're going to increase our productivity by a bazillion percent. And we have this list of agents that we want to go develop that's going to be the, the departments that we're going to transform with this. And you know what? Joe in the XYZ department, that's the manager of the XYZ department, that's going to be the first one that we do. In that world, what do you think Joe is going to do when some consultants show up at the door and say, we're here to help? He's going to fight that with every ounce of his being and make sure that this thing fails, right? Because what did the company do? The company did a very good job of telegraphing, Joe, either you, but certainly most of your team will be gone as a result of our having implemented this. So they're not thinking through the real strategic implementations, because they're so, in the one case, the management consulting companies are doing missteps as a result of technological naivety. On the other hand, you're having companies wind up overly focused on the technology and not on the human being part of it. So in both
Yeah.
cases, it's wrong. It's a wrong approach.
Yeah, and to the point earlier about, this is actually about empowering people to use the full suite of tools rather than
Sure.
just adding, a hammer to the mix. Why would I feel incentivized to use the tool to make my job more efficient if fundamentally, if that job, if the AI does it really well, then if the idea is that I am out of a job, why would I be incentivized, right? And I think a lot of people are really feeling that fear right now. And my advice to leaders is certainly to like start disconnecting the role from the person. You may not need the role anymore, but there's many things that the person can still
Or the
do,
role will
right?
change.
The role will change, exactly.
So
And there is, I think, an opportunity, and we should take it in terms of taking more and more roles and automating them. And then let's figure out new things for people to spend time on that drive value, drive growth, drive possibility. So if you have, to your concrete example, or you have, like, I think you mentioned you went from 60 salespeople to 7 salespeople who are like overseeing everything. Those 53 people, um,
they got redeployed.
there's
They were
yeah, there's so many
redeployed
other
inside the
things they
organization.
can do, right? And this was the same kind of wave we had with the internet, right? Of people saying like, oh, we don't need secretaries anymore, or like typewriters anymore, etc. And again, I think it's just like it's about changing things. Things move and things evolve rather than replacing. Um, and the speed of this one is different. The pace of this change is different. And I'm curious, what are your predictions
Argue
around
it's the
that?
only way that it's different is speed. Because
Right. So
I'll
tell
tell
me
you
more
that
about
that
that.
society has gone through more fundamental changes than this. I mean, the
Right.
most fundamental change that society has gone through is industrialization, where we
Hmm.
converted uh, the world was agrarian, right? You worked the land, you worked the farm, and in in the early industrialized countries, they went from agrarian to urban industrialized over some 150 years, something like that. Uh, the industrialization of Asia happened much faster, happened over 20 years, right? Certainly look at China's kind of poster child example. They went from an agrarian society to an urban industrialized society in one generation, right? It was very fast pace of change. That change, winding being a farmer in the hinterlands to living in a city working in an industrial job. That was a more fundamental change than what
Yeah.
how workers are going to be affected by this new wave. So I don't even think it's the most fundamental change society is ever going to go through. I would agree with you that the pace of change is pretty fast, but it's probably not any faster than what China went through.
Well,
How they convert themselves, how they became an industrial country in only 20 years. I mean, you're talking about something similar, maybe 10 to 20 years for society really to integrate and really find out how this AI actually gets deployed. And it's possible to make predictions. In every case, society found a way, right? To
of course.
misquote Jurassic Park, society found a way. So the um, here I'll use this as an example. When the ATM came out, yes, I do remember when ATMs were a brand new thing, right? The prediction was that why would you ever have bank branches? Why would you ever have tellers? Why would you ever have bankers? All you need is an ATM, right? As long as you can deposit and withdraw, that's what you needed, right? Well, there's more bank branches today than there ever were pre-ATM. There are more teller or at least banking officers than there ever were pre-ATM. So that's a case that society was completely wrong about how the banking industry was going to wind up developing as a result of a technological change. It was totally, completely wrong, right? Opposite example, the typing pool, right? There was, now this predates even me. There were, actually, but certainly doesn't predate my dad. I mean, um, my dad worked for IBM pretty much his entire career. And he was a key punch operator. What a key punch operator was basically a form of a typist. And he worked swing shift. And even during the swing shift, in the middle of the night, there would be hundreds and hundreds of these typists typing away. And kind of in the normal typing pools, every large business had an entire floor of people just typing documents, right? Clearly, that role disappeared. We no longer have a typing pool, but those people that had been in the typing pool did wind up walking up the value chain, right?
Yeah,
They wound
exactly.
up becoming the secretaries, right?
Yeah.
And that as we evolved away from having secretaries, I guess there are some people still have secretaries. I kind of find it funny that anybody who is like, it takes more time to communicate your ideas to someone else than it would just to do it with the tools that we have. What a waste of time.
Yeah.
However, those secretaries now are evolving
Yeah.
into more
Yeah.
administrative kinds of jobs, right? So unemployment didn't rise as a result of the typing pool to the secretary to administrative positions. People simply walked up the value chain, right? but certainly the idea of a typing pool no longer exists, right?
Yeah, I think in this current scenario, part of the reason this is, I agree with you. I think that that is the best case scenario of like we find new things for people to do, while we automate the roles, we displace people, but that there is something for people to step into. But I think part of that is because of how these tools are being marketed as cost efficiency mechanisms. I think
And
that's
intellectually lazy methods.
yeah, I completely agree with you there. And
Because the
I
op
wonder if the pace is also influencing things.
well, uh, yes, but it's also over easy. It's overly easy to hype up how fast these changes are going to happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
I see what you mean.
3 years in to the AI, this
Hmm.
AI wave, would you
Hmm.
have ever expected 3 years ago that there would be an MIT study saying 95% failure rate, right?
Good shot.
At
Yeah.
3 years in, we would have thought, oh man, if you were already on the bus, you're
Hmm.
doomed. You might as well just cancel your lease, shut down the offices. That's it. You are done. 3 years
Yeah.
in. And clearly that hasn't happened, right?
Yeah.
People are doing trials and missteps and learning along the way. But the the overarching trend is correct, which is this is the global productivity unlock that humanity needed to have happen in exactly this moment. Because unfortunately, um, the biggest single crisis, my biggest single crisis that humanity is facing is global depopulation. Because there are very, very, very few pockets of the world that actually have birth rates that are above the replacement rate.
Yeah.
Like you struggle to find
Yeah.
there's little pockets in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, but it's kind of it, right?
Yeah.
So you have globally, you have a population that's becoming a whole lot of old people being supported by a very few, an inverted pyramid of very
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
young people. So the only way that we get through this stage in human civilization is if we can make those young people unbelievably productive. And
Hmm.
had AI not come along,
Hmm.
we would have had a massive problem. And
Hmm.
so, the answer to this question will wind up figuring itself out over the next 50 years. It's not a 5 year thing, but over the next 50 years. But
Yeah.
I strongly believe that when we look back 50 years from now, we'll realize that this was the great productivity. Well, number one, that it was the great productivity unlock that civilization needed in this moment, that humanity needed in this moment. And the second thing we'll realize is not just productivity, but the sheer pace of innovation and breakthroughs that can benefit humanity will
Yeah.
have increased by orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
I mean, something like, DeepMind's AlphaFold alone, probably that one project probably ultimately will advance pharmaceuticals by at least 10 or 20 years. Just one AI project.
Yeah.
Right? So the pace of innovation, the pace of solving humanity's problems will have so greatly increased as a result of this technology. Thank goodness it came when it did.
Yeah. I love the optimism you bring to the table around this. And I think it's a really important moment to hold on to that because I do feel like we're in the kind of messy middle
Yeah.
at the moment,
There's plenty of opportunities to screw up. it's,
Well,
it's,
it's funny you mentioned the thing about young people being more productive and like just to temper that perspective for a second, like there's so many young people who are like college grads that are having a really hard time finding jobs right now because so many of those entry level roles are being automated. And again, I think it's because of that intellectual laziness, as you put it. And I do think it's because we're in that messy middle and we're not actually taking advantage of, these kids who are coming into the workforce.
Well, that's an interesting question because there are companies that there is a split in the philosophy around this stuff, right? Because
Yeah.
there are companies that feel like, gee, at this point, I really want only my gray hair engineers.
Mm.
Because those are the guys that are super productive. Those are the guys that are able to outproduce anything the AI could do. I
Mm-hmm.
really need my
Mm-hmm.
gray hair engineers. So why would I invest in
Mm-hmm.
recent college grads, right? But there's another set of companies that are coming to the conclusion that, yeah, but those recent college grads, they know how to use these tools. They are AI native.
Yeah. They grew up with it.
So they they grew up with it. So they are much more likely to be not only facile, but just plain not resistant to adopting these tools. So, and ultimately, maybe they do compete with the gray hairs in their
Mm-hmm.
productivity, et cetera. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
it's unclear how that question actually is going to wind up playing out over time.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, the burden is going to fall on the young people because, the gray hairs wind up aging out. They
Yeah, yeah,
age
yeah.
out of the workforce. And
Yeah,
then, well, then what do you do?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, it's so interesting, Armando. I love the optimism you bring to the table and the kind of how you hold it and how you're thinking about it. And as we close, I'd love to ask you, what advice do you have for leaders as they kind of balance the benefits and the risks of the pace and the technology and all of these moments in this world?
Well, step one, if you have one of the big management consulting firms advising you on your AI strategy, show them the exit because you will wind. I spend so much time undoing these, this
Look, you
this
won't get an
really
argument from me. I've been in the
terrible,
same boat.
terrible advice that they give. Is just, it's like it's painful how bad the advice is on where to go.
Yeah.
Number two is um, there there are no single companies, at least that I'm aware of, that can really serve the this problem space completely, right? So, for example, with Nublock, my own company, we're really good at doing kind of the technology strategic consulting. We're really good at doing implementation. We can throw some very smart guys loaded up with their PhDs to go actually implement this stuff. But we're certainly not change management guys.
Mhm.
We're certainly not really kind of specialized management consulting that really understands. All right, what is the implications for your human resource? What is your implication for what this implementation means for you organizationally, strategically, right? Um, and even more fundamental problems than that. The most companies are not prepared for AI because simply they don't have their data available in a retrievable form. So there's all
Yeah.
kinds of digital transformation companies that are out there. So I think it's
Yeah.
it's it's more of an ecosystem that winds up solving these things, right? And unfortunately, you go out and you engage with one of these foundation companies, given that they only sell hammers, they're going to convince you that this is a hammer kind of problem, right? And
Yeah.
they're going to be, I mean, I'm not going to name who, but the who are obvious, right?
Yeah.
What is what is a foundation model company going to recommend? They're going to recommend a very specific path, and they are every bit as blind or incapable of dealing with the real human resource issues as a specialty technology firm like mine is, right? But they're big enough that they can pretend
Mhm.
that they understand how to deal with those issues. And they wind up getting they wind up leading the customer down a wrong path, both from a personnel perspective, but also from a technology perspective. Because once again, they've spent how many bazillion dollars on developing this hammer, because this is the gold standard hammer, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So they get led down a bad technology path, but they also wind up getting led down a bad human resources path as a result of all this. So I think, a caveat emptor, right? I do think that there is a place for these. I think AI does open up a whole world for these specialty consulting firms, New Block being prototypic of many of them, right? But these specialty firms that each have their own areas of expertise that as an aggregate can kind of take on the enterprise and give a reasonable solution. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see lots and lots of these new block style of companies and lots of these digital transformation companies becoming AI transformation and lots more sophisticated change management firms coming on deck that specialize specifically on the AI transformation problem. You'll see that kind of be an advent that happens.
Yeah. I think
The
it's a
other,
really,
and
I
one
think
more
it's
point,
very important. Oh, good.
one more point that's important. The other thing that happens is it's unclear what the role of traditional SaaS companies are here,
Mhm.
right? Because I mean, I go to any of these monolithic SaaS companies, and I mean, some people do take the extreme view of this that, an enterprise SaaS company, name one, right? It's nothing more than a user interface on a database.
Mhm.
AI could do that. As long as AI has access to the data, it can provide a lot better user interface. So what the hell do I need that enterprise SaaS product for? And why am I paying millions of dollars a year? So you also see a total disruption of what happens at the enterprise level of what subscriptions do I hold? How much am I really willing to spend for a database with a user interface on it, right? When I can probably come up with a more appropriate solution. And in classic problem here is that it is by default enterprise SaaS companies are doing what you'd expect them to do, which is to keep selling their product, and they add in a little AI component on the side because they need to be AI. Well, it's not really an AI solution, right? That's just something bolted on the side. Go, go spend 15 minutes with Copilot and
Right.
then compare that to a startup company that did an AI native implementation of an equivalent. Oh my God, it's night and day, right? Compare Copilot PowerPoint compared to Gamma. Oh my God. Because once again, you have this legacy that you can't
Yeah.
escape. So what are you going to do? Is you're going to bolt on a little bit of AI onto PowerPoint and declare it good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Gamma is AI native from its very start, and it's a
Right.
wildly superior product.
Right. Right.
So enterprise SaaS goes through some kind of transformation in this process as well.
Yeah, there are a couple things that stand out to me. I think the point that I wanted to make earlier is there's really two sides to this coin that I'm hearing you name, which is there's the technology component, there's the implementation of the technology piece, which is like finding the right solution for the problem that you actually have. And then the other piece is having the cultural foundations for this to thrive. And those are two different sides of the coin. And what I'm hearing you say is, like figure out what your problem is and find the right partners and the right people and the right kind of support. And I would take that further and say like, and figure out how your own, I think now there's kind of this democratization of these tools of like, go talk to your own people and see who can actually create new possibilities for how things are done right now. You might not need to rely outside in quite the same way anymore because your own people's productivity is multifold now.
Well, yes, I agree. And
Yeah.
certainly one of my messages, and obviously from a perspective of New Block, I'm gonna take this view, but even independent of that, I would take this view, I believe, which is don't engage in consulting services from an enterprise supplier. You go to somebody that's independent. And if it turns out that for the particular use case, Gemini or GPT or Claude or whatever is the right solution for that use case, for that company, have an independent hand making that determination. Don't go to Google and be surprised that the solution always looks like Gemini.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Armando, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and helping us kind of see this in a different way. And thank you most of all for your optimism in this space. I think we need to start
Yeah, thank you.
shifting some of the conversation and shifting some of the intellectual laziness. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, Armando.